An orphaned boy accidentally finds an old photograph that connects him to a reclusive millionaire, only to discover they share a tragic past and dark family secrets neither could have imagined. What begins as a desperate attempt to find answers about his biological parents spirals into a dangerous game of revenge, blackmail, and murder that threatens not just their newfound bond, but their very lives. As they unravel the web of lies, they must decide if redemption and forgiveness can ever truly heal the wounds of betrayal that span generations. "Mrs. Reynolds," called out Miss Harper, the stern-faced director of Pinewood Orphanage. "Mr. Alexander Whitmore will see you now." Jamie Reynolds nervously straightened his threadbare sweater. At 17, after 11 years at Pinewood, he'd learned to expect nothing from these interviews. Wealthy potential donors came through occasionally, wrote checks, took photos for their charity portfolios, and disappeared. But this time felt different. Mr. Whitmore had specifically requested to meet with him alone, out of all 37 children at Pinewood. "Remember your manners," Miss Harper whispered sharply as she led Jamie to the administrative office. "Mr. Whitmore is one of the wealthiest men in New England. His foundation funds 3 of our programs." The office was bigger than Jamie's entire shared dormitory. Alexander Whitmore, a tall man with penetrating gray eyes, didn't even look up from his papers when Jamie entered. For a full minute, the only sound was the ticking of the antique clock on the wall and the scratching of Whitmore's fountain pen. "So," Whitmore finally said, his voice cool and detached, "you're the boy who broke into my office last week." Jamie's heart stopped. "Sir, save it." Whitmore raised a hand. "Security footage doesn't lie. What I want to know is why. Why risk criminal charges to break into Whitmore Enterprises? And why go straight for my private office on the top floor?" The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Miss Harper's face had turned white with shock. "I'm waiting, Mr. Reynolds," Whitmore said, his eyes scanning Jamie like a scientist might examine a curious specimen. Jamie swallowed hard. He had 2 choices: lie and face certain prosecution, or tell the truth and sound completely insane. He reached into his pocket and pulled out the faded photograph, placing it carefully on the polished desk. "Because of this, sir." Whitmore's expression didn't change as he picked up the old photograph. It showed a young couple with a baby, standing in front of a lake house. Nothing remarkable, except for the fact that the man in the photo was unmistakably a younger Alexander Whitmore. "Where did you get this?" Whitmore's voice had lost its coldness, replaced by something Jamie couldn't quite identify. "I found it hidden in my mother's old Bible, my biological mother's. It was the only thing left with me when I was abandoned here." For the first time since Jamie entered, Whitmore seemed genuinely surprised. "And you broke into my company because?" "To find out if you knew her. If you knew anything about why she left me here." A heavy silence filled the room. Miss Harper looked like she might faint. "Miss Harper," Whitmore said suddenly, not taking his eyes off Jamie, "I believe Mr. Reynolds and I need to speak privately." "Of course, Mr. Whitmore," she stammered, practically running from the room. When the door closed, Whitmore's demeanor changed completely. He stood up and walked to the window, his back to Jamie. 11 years ago," he said quietly, "my brother Daniel and his wife died in what was ruled a boating accident at our family's lake house. Their newborn son disappeared. The police concluded he had drowned, though his body was never recovered." Jamie felt a chill run through him. "The timing matches," Whitmore continued, turning back to face Jamie. "And I can see Daniel in your face. The eyes especially. Are you saying—" Jamie couldn't finish the sentence. "I'm saying nothing yet," Whitmore replied sharply. "This requires verification. DNA testing." "But why would someone abandon me here if I was your nephew? Why not just—" "That," Whitmore cut him off, "is precisely what I intend to find out. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you." That evening, as Jamie packed his few belongings into a worn duffel bag, his hands wouldn't stop shaking. Whitmore had made the arrangements with remarkable speed. Temporary guardianship while the DNA tests were processed, immediate removal from Pinewood, and transfer to his personal estate on the outskirts of the city. "Jamie," whispered Eli, his roommate of 6 years, "are you really leaving with that Whitmore guy? What if he's some kind of creep?" Jamie zipped up his bag. "He thinks I might be his missing nephew." "And you believe that?" Eli's eyes widened. "Rich people don't just show up and claim orphans, man. This isn't a movie." But the photograph felt heavy in Jamie's pocket. The only link to his past, the only proof he hadn't appeared out of thin air 11 years ago. "I have to know, Eli, even if it's dangerous." Miss Harper appeared in the doorway. "The car is waiting, Mr. Reynolds." Outside, a sleek black SUV with tinted windows idled in the circular driveway. The driver, a stone-faced man in a dark suit, opened the rear door without a word. Jamie hesitated at the threshold of the only home he'd known since age 6. "Mr. Reynolds?" Miss Harper said quietly. Her usual sternness softened slightly. "Please be careful. Mr. Whitmore is complicated. His family history is not without controversy." "What do you mean?" She glanced nervously at the waiting car. "Just remember that wealth can hide many sins." The drive to Whitmore Estate took nearly an hour, winding through the city and into the lush countryside beyond. As they passed through ornate iron gates and up a long driveway lined with ancient oaks, Jamie's stomach knotted with anxiety. The mansion that came into view looked like something from another century, all stone and columns and sprawling wings. "Mr. Whitmore is waiting in the west study," the driver announced, breaking his silence as he parked. "Miss Sullivan will show you to your room first." As if on cue, an elegant woman in her 50s appeared at the grand entrance. "Welcome to Whitmore Estate, Jamie. I'm Catherine Sullivan, Mr. Whitmore's personal assistant." She led him through a maze of hallways adorned with artwork that probably cost more than Pinewood's entire annual budget. Jamie's room turned out to be a suite larger than the orphanage's entire boys' dormitory. "This is mine?" he asked, staring at the 4-poster bed and sitting area with its own fireplace. "For now," Catherine replied, her expression unreadable. "Dinner is at 7. Mr. Whitmore expects you in the west study at 8 for a discussion." Left alone, Jamie set his duffel bag on an antique bench and walked to the window. The estate grounds stretched out before him, manicured gardens, a tennis court, and in the distance, the glimmer of what must be a private lake. Everything about this place screamed old money and old secrets. He pulled out the photograph again, the lake in the background. Could it be the same one visible from his window? Was this where his parents had died? Where he should have drowned as a baby? At precisely 8 o'clock, Jamie knocked on the heavy oak door of the west study. "Enter," called Whitmore's voice. The room was a testament to masculine luxury: leather-bound books, a massive desk, and walls covered in framed photographs and newspaper clippings. Whitmore stood by a drink cart, pouring amber liquid into a crystal tumbler. "Sit," he said, gesturing to a leather chair opposite the desk. "I've arranged for DNA testing tomorrow morning. Results will take several days." Jamie nodded, trying to maintain his composure. "Thank you for bringing me here, Mr. Whitmore. I know this is unusual." "Unusual doesn't begin to cover it." Whitmore took a seat behind his desk. "I had investigators searching for years. The official story never sat right with me. Daniel was an expert sailor. The idea that he'd take his wife and newborn out in dangerous conditions was absurd." "You think something else happened?" Whitmore's eyes narrowed. "I know something else happened. What I don't know is how you survived, or who took you to that orphanage." Jamie hesitated, then asked the question that had been burning in his mind. "If I am your nephew, what happens then?" "Then," Whitmore said slowly, "everything changes. The Whitmore fortune has been in limbo since Daniel's death. As his only child, you would be the primary heir. After me, of course." A knock interrupted them. Catherine entered with a folder. "The preliminary report you requested, sir." Whitmore opened it, scanning the contents with a frown. "Has Stevens been notified?" "Yes, sir. He's on his way." After Catherine left, Jamie noticed Whitmore studying him with uncomfortable intensity. "There's something you should know," Whitmore said finally. If you are indeed Daniel's son, your return will not be welcomed by everyone. There are people who have spent 11 years believing they would inherit the Whitmore fortune. I'm not interested in money, Jamie said quickly. Whitmore laughed, a sound without warmth. Everyone is interested in money, Mr. Reynolds, especially those who've never had it. Over the next 3 days, Jamie felt like he'd stepped into an elaborate play where everyone knew their lines except him. The mansion staff treated him with a strange mix of curiosity and deference. Catherine Sullivan maintained her perfect professional distance while orchestrating his new wardrobe, the DNA testing, and his daily schedule. But it was the whispered conversations that stopped when he entered rooms, the meaningful glances exchanged over dinner, that told Jamie the most. Something was happening beneath the surface of Whitmore's apparent generosity. On the morning of the 4th day, Jamie awoke to find Catherine waiting in the sitting area of his suite, her usually composed face showing signs of strain. Mr. Whitmore requests your presence in his study immediately. The DNA results? Jamie asked, suddenly fully awake. Among other things. In the study, Whitmore wasn't alone. A distinguished older man in an expensive suit sat in one of the leather chairs, while a younger woman paced by the windows. They both turned when Jamie entered, their expressions a mix of shock and something darker. "Jamie," Whitmore said, his voice carefully controlled. "This is my attorney, Howard Stevens, and my niece, Victoria Whitmore, Daniel's wife's daughter from her first marriage." Victoria's eyes bored into Jamie with unconcealed hostility. "So this is the imposter." "Victoria," Whitmore warned. "Don't, Victoria. Me, Uncle Alex," she snapped. "We all know what's happening here. Some orphan finds an old photo and thinks he can cash in on family tragedy. It's disgusting." Stevens cleared his throat. "Perhaps we should discuss the test results." Whitmore nodded, pulling an envelope from his desk. "The DNA comparison confirms it. Jamie is Daniel's biological son. My nephew." The words hung in the air like smoke. Victoria's face contorted with rage. "Impossible! This is clearly fraud. I demand independent testing." "Already done," Stevens interjected. 3 separate labs confirmed the results. Jamie felt dizzy. Despite everything, despite the photograph and Whitmore's suspicions, he hadn't truly believed it could be real. He had a family, a past, a name that wasn't Reynolds. "This changes nothing," Victoria hissed. "He disappeared for 11 years, conveniently reappearing just as the trust is set to transfer. He probably orchestrated the whole thing." "I was 6 years old when I was left at Pinewood," Jamie said quietly. "How exactly would I have orchestrated anything?" Victoria turned to Whitmore. "You can't possibly believe this. After everything we've been through, after all the searching, suddenly he appears with a convenient photograph?" Whitmore's expression hardened. "Enough, Victoria. The evidence is clear. Jamie is Daniel's son, which makes him my heir and your cousin." "Half-cousin," she corrected venomously. "And this isn't over. Not by a long shot." She stormed out, slamming the door behind her. Stevens coughed uncomfortably. "I'll begin the legal process to establish Jamie's identity and rights to the Whitmore Trust. It will take time, and Victoria will likely contest everything." After the lawyer left, Jamie found his voice. "I didn't come here for money." Whitmore studied him. "Then why did you come?" "To find out who I am, who my parents were, what happened to them." Something changed in Whitmore's eyes. A flash of what might have been respect. "Then perhaps we want the same thing, Jamie. Because I've spent 11 years trying to discover what really happened the night my brother died. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us." Now back to the story. That afternoon, Whitmore took Jamie to a part of the estate he hadn't seen before. A small, ivy-covered guest house nestled at the edge of the woods near the lake. "This was Daniel's," Whitmore explained as he unlocked the door. "He preferred it to the main house. Said he could think better here. Inside, it was like stepping into a time capsule. Bookshelves lined the walls. A worn leather couch faced a stone fireplace, and a desk by the window overlooked the lake. Everything was perfectly preserved, as though Daniel Whitmore might return at any moment. "I've kept it exactly as it was," Whitmore said, watching Jamie closely. "After the accident, I couldn't bear to change anything." Jamie moved through the space in a daze, touching book spines, examining framed photographs. In every image, he could see the resemblance now. His eyes, the shape of his jaw, all inherited from the smiling man with his arm around a beautiful woman. "My mother?" Jamie asked, pointing to the woman. "Eliza," Whitmore nodded. "Brilliant mathematician. That's how she and Daniel met, at MIT. Victoria was her daughter from her first marriage, to Richard Hargrove." "What happened to him? Victoria's father?" Whitmore's expression darkened. "Heart attack, allegedly. Though, given what happened later to Daniel and Eliza," Jamie's pulse quickened. "You think their deaths weren't accidents?" "I know they weren't." Whitmore moved to the desk and pressed a hidden button beneath its surface. A small panel in the bookshelf slid open, revealing a safe. Daniel left evidence. From the safe, Whitmore withdrew a leather journal and a USB drive. "Your father was investigating financial irregularities at Whitmore Enterprises before he died. Specifically, in our overseas operations. He believed someone inside the company was using our shipping infrastructure for smuggling, possibly human trafficking." The revelation hit Jamie like a physical blow. "And you think that's why they were killed? Because he discovered something?" "I believe so, but I could never prove it." After their deaths, the evidence Daniel had gathered disappeared. The police investigation was suspiciously brief. The lake house security cameras malfunctioned that night. Too many coincidences. Jamie sank onto the couch, trying to process everything. "Why are you telling me this now?" Whitmore's face was grim. "Because with your reappearance, whoever was behind their deaths might feel threatened again. You need to understand the danger you're in." That night, Jamie couldn't sleep. He sat by the window of his suite, watching the moonlight on the lake where his parents had died. The lake that should have been his grave, too. A soft knock startled him. He opened the door to find an elderly man in a butler's uniform. "Forgive the intrusion, Mr. Reynolds. My name is Harrison. I was Mr. Daniel's personal butler for many years." Jamie stepped aside, allowing the man to enter. "I needed to speak with you privately," Harrison said, his voice barely above a whisper. "About the night your parents died." Jamie's heart jumped. "You know something?" "I know that Ms. Victoria was here that weekend, though she claimed to be in Boston. I know that Mr. Whitmore's business partner, Lawrence Prescott, arrived unexpectedly. And I know that your mother called me, frantic, just hours before the accident, asking me to prepare the guest house for an immediate departure." "They were planning to leave?" Harrison nodded. "With you." "Mrs. Whitmore said they needed to disappear for a while." She sounded terrified. Jamie leaned forward. "Did you tell the police?" "I tried. My statement was never included in the official report." Harrison glanced nervously at the door. "The night after I spoke to the detectives, my brakes failed on the drive home. The police called it an accident." "Just like my parents." "Indeed." Harrison reached into his pocket and withdrew a small key. "This opens a lockbox at First National Bank, downtown. Box 713. Mr. Daniel gave it to me for safekeeping the week before he died. Said if anything happened to him, I should ensure it reached you when you were old enough." Jamie took the key, his hand trembling. "You knew I was alive? All this time?" "No." Harrison's eyes filled with tears. "But Mr. Daniel feared for your safety. He made contingency plans. I've waited 11 years, hoping against hope that somehow you had survived." After Harrison left, Jamie sat holding the small key, his mind racing. If his father had feared for their lives enough to plan an escape, enough to create contingencies for his infant son, then the danger had been real, and might still be. Dawn was breaking when another knock came at his door. This time it was Catherine Sullivan, her usually perfect appearance disheveled, her eyes red-rimmed. "You need to come quickly," she said. "It's Mr. Whitmore." Jamie followed her through the silent house to Whitmore's bedroom, where two paramedics were loading a still figure onto a stretcher. "What happened?" Jamie gasped. "Apparent heart attack," one of the paramedics replied. "Called it in about an hour ago." Catherine pulled Jamie aside as they wheeled Whitmore out. "He was working late in his study. When I brought his evening tea, I found him collapsed on the floor." "Will he be okay?" Catherine's professional mask slipped, showing genuine fear. "I don't know, but before the ambulance arrived, he regained consciousness briefly. He said to tell you to trust no one, not even him." As the ambulance pulled away, Jamie noticed Victoria watching from the shadows of the hallway, her face unreadable. When she saw him looking, she quickly disappeared. Back in his room, Jamie made a decision. Whatever was happening in the Whitmore household, whatever had led to his parents' deaths and now possibly threatened his uncle, the answers weren't going to come from waiting around. He needed to see what was in that lockbox. Slipping the key into his pocket, he headed for the garage, where several cars were parked. He found the keys to the least conspicuous one, a modest sedan, hanging in the garage office. As he started the engine, the passenger door suddenly opened, and Catherine Sullivan slid in beside him. "Whatever you're planning," she said calmly, "you shouldn't do it alone." Jamie stared at her in shock. "How did you?" "I've worked for Alexander Whitmore for 20 years. I recognized the look of someone about to do something reckless." She fastened her seatbelt. "Drive. I'll explain on the way." As they headed toward the city, Catherine revealed what she knew. "Alexander has suspected foul play in your parents' deaths for years. After it happened, he withdrew from the company operations, focusing instead on a private investigation. Lawrence Prescott took over daily management." "The same Prescott who was at the lake house the weekend my parents died?" Catherine nodded grimly. "Lawrence and Victoria have been close for years, even before your parents' deaths. The implication hung in the air between them. You think they were involved? In what happened to my parents?" "I think," Catherine said carefully, "that billions of dollars create powerful motives. Daniel was the heir to everything. Then you. With both of you gone, Victoria stands to inherit through her connection to your mother." Jamie gripped the steering wheel tighter. "And now someone's tried to kill my uncle too. If it was indeed a heart attack," Catherine murmured. At First National Bank, Jamie presented the key and his ID. The bank manager escorted them to the vault, then left them alone with box 713. Inside was a sealed envelope, a small flash drive, and a well-worn stuffed bear, the kind of toy a parent might give their baby son. Jamie's hands shook as he opened the envelope. Inside was a letter, dated 1 week before his parents' deaths. "To my son," it began. "If you're reading this, then my worst fears have come to pass. Your mother and I have discovered something terrible about the company, something that certain people would kill to keep hidden. We've gathered evidence, but we don't know who we can trust. Not my brother, not our security team, no one. We're planning to take you and disappear until we can safely expose the truth. If you're reading this, we failed, but the evidence is still out there, hidden where only a true Whitmore would think to look." The letter continued with personal messages, hopes for the son Daniel would never see grow up. By the time Jamie finished reading, tears streamed down his face. Catherine placed a hand on his shoulder. "What does it mean? What evidence? And where would a true Whitmore look?" Jamie picked up the stuffed bear, examining it closely. Something about it seemed odd. One ear slightly larger than the other, the stitching around the neck uneven. On instinct, he gently pulled at the loose thread. The bear's head separated slightly from its body, revealing a small compartment inside. And within that space was a single key, older and more ornate than the bank box key. "I know what this is," Jamie whispered. "It's the key to the lake house, the place where they died." Catherine's eyes widened. "The property has been abandoned since the accident. Alexander couldn't bear to sell it. But he never went back either. As they drove toward the lake house, neither noticed the black SUV maintaining a careful distance behind them, nor the grim-faced driver reporting their movements via phone. The lakeside property was about an hour from the main estate, accessible only by a private road winding through dense forest. As they approached, the trees parted to reveal a beautiful A-frame cabin perched on the shore, its large windows reflecting the afternoon sun. "It's been maintained," Catherine noted with surprise as they parked. "Someone's been keeping it up." Jamie inserted the ornate key into the front door lock. It turned smoothly, as if recently oiled. Inside, the cabin was immaculate. No dust, no signs of 11 years of abandonment. "This doesn't make sense," Catherine murmured. "Alexander told everyone this place was closed up after the accident." Jamie moved through the space slowly, taking in the rustic luxury of the cabin. Large windows overlooked the lake, where a small dock extended into the water. Family photos lined the walls: his father, his mother, baby photos that must have been him. "If the evidence is here," Jamie said, "where would a true Whitmore hide it?" Catherine was examining the bookshelf. Daniel was sentimental about family history. Alexander always complained that he was too attached to the past. "The past?" Jamie repeated, looking around the room with new eyes. His gaze settled on a large painting above the fireplace. An old sailing ship battling a storm. The Whitmore legacy. Shipping and transportation. He moved to the painting and carefully lifted it from the wall. Behind it was a small wall safe. "We need a combination," Catherine said. Jamie thought about his father's letter. "Where only a true Whitmore would look." What would a true Whitmore know? "When was the company founded?" he asked. 1847. Catherine answered immediately. Jamie tried the combination. 18 to 47. Nothing. "What about the day Daniel and Eliza died?" Catherine provided the date. Jamie tried again. Still nothing. Frustrated, he stepped back, looking around the room for inspiration. His eyes fell on a framed photograph on the mantel, Daniel and Eliza on their wedding day. "Their anniversary," Jamie whispered, trying the date. The safe clicked open. Inside was a thick folder of documents and another flash drive. As Jamie reached for them, a voice from the doorway froze him in place. "I wouldn't touch those if I were you." Lawrence Prescott stood in the cabin entrance, a pistol held casually at his side. Behind him, Victoria stepped into view, her expression triumphant. "I knew you'd lead us right to it," she said. "Just like your father, too clever for your own good." Jamie's blood ran cold as he stared at the gun in Lawrence Prescott's hand. The tall, silver-haired man stepped further into the cabin, his expensive shoes making no sound on the hardwood floor. "Step away from the safe," Prescott ordered, his voice calm as if he were merely discussing the weather. "Victoria, secure the documents." Victoria moved forward, her designer heels clicking sharply. She grabbed the folder and flash drive, a triumphant smile playing at her lips. 11 years of searching," she said, flipping through the pages. "And all it took was one orphan to lead us right to it." Catherine stepped protectively closer to Jamie. "Lawrence, think about what you're doing. The boy is Daniel's son. A fact that creates numerous complications," Prescott replied, his eyes never leaving Jamie. "Complications that should have been permanently resolved 11 years ago." The realization hit Jamie like a physical blow. "You killed my parents." Prescott's expression didn't change. "Your father was naive. He discovered our supplementary business operations and thought exposing them was the right thing to do. He never understood that sometimes moral compromises are necessary for progress." "Supplementary business operations?" Catherine repeated. "You mean human trafficking, using Whitmore shipping containers to transport people like cargo." Victoria waved a dismissive hand. "Such a dramatic way of putting it. We simply provided transportation services for people willing to pay premium rates to circumvent immigration restrictions." "People who ended up as forced labor," Jamie said, the pieces falling into place. "That's what my father discovered, isn't it? That's why you killed him." "We tried reasoning with him first," Prescott said as if explaining a minor business disagreement. Offered him a percentage. But Daniel was always so righteous. When he threatened to go to the authorities with evidence, we had no choice. And my mother? And me? We had to die too? Collateral damage, Victoria said coldly. Nothing personal. Catherine inched closer to Jamie. And Alexander? Did you give him a heart attack too? A flicker of something, perhaps annoyance, crossed Prescott's face. Alexander became inconvenient once he started asking questions again. Fortunately, certain compounds are virtually undetectable in toxicology screenings when administered correctly. Jamie felt sick. These people had murdered his family, tried to murder him, and had just poisoned his uncle, all while talking about it as if discussing a business transaction. What now? Jamie asked, trying to keep his voice steady. You kill us too? Unfortunately necessary, Prescott sighed. But it will be quick. A tragic accident. The orphan boy, overcome with emotion at discovering his past, brought his new friend to see his parents, Lake House. Something went wrong with the gas line. A terrible explosion. No survivors. Victoria checked her watch. We should hurry. Harrison called to say Alexander's condition is stabilizing. Apparently, the old man is stronger than we thought. Harrison? Catherine looked stunned. He's working with you? Everyone has their price. Victoria smirked. His was surprisingly reasonable. Prescott gestured with the gun. Into the kitchen. We've already prepared the gas leak. It will look perfectly accidental. As they moved toward the kitchen, Jamie's mind raced. He needed to stall, to find a way out. His gaze darted around the room, looking for anything that might help. Was it worth it? He asked suddenly. Killing my parents? Trying to kill me? All for what? Money, power, Prescott corrected. The Whitmore empire is on the verge of becoming a global force. Your father's moral qualms would have destroyed everything. And you think you'll get away with this? Catherine asked. Even if you kill us, Alexander knows. Alexander knows nothing concrete, Victoria interrupted. Just suspicions. And soon he'll have another tragic accident. By then, I'll be the only Whitmore heir. Lawrence and I will control everything. Jamie noticed something then. A small blinking light on the bookshelf behind Prescott. A security camera, partially hidden among the books. The cabin wasn't just maintained, it was monitored. My father knew, Jamie said, the realization dawning. He knew you'd come back for the evidence someday. That's why he left it here, as bait. A flicker of uncertainty crossed Prescott's face. What are you talking about? The cameras. Jamie nodded toward the bookshelf. This whole place is under surveillance, isn't it? Has been for 11 years, waiting for you to show your hand. Victoria spun around, spotting the small blinking light. Lawrence, she hissed. He's right. Prescott's composure cracked for the first time. It doesn't matter. We'll destroy the recordings after we're done here. The recordings aren't stored here, Jamie bluffed, having no idea if his theory was correct. My father was too smart for that. They're being streamed directly to a secure server. Probably the same place he sent copies of all his evidence. It was a guess, but from the panic that flashed across Victoria's face, Jamie knew he'd hit close to the mark. He's lying, she said, but her voice trembled slightly. Daniel wasn't that sophisticated with technology. Maybe not, Catherine said, catching on to Jamie's strategy, but Alexander is. And he's had 11 years to perfect the system. Prescott's hand tightened on the gun. Enough! Into the kitchen now! He shoved Jamie forward roughly. As they entered the kitchen, Jamie saw the elaborate setup, the loosened gas line, the timer set to create a spark. They had planned everything. On your knees, both of you, Prescott ordered. You won't get away with this, Catherine said, her voice surprisingly calm. Even if you kill us, the truth will come out. I've heard that line in movies, Victoria sneered. It's never true in real life. Outside, the sound of tires on gravel suddenly cut through the tension. Prescott moved to the window, keeping the gun trained on Jamie and Catherine. Who is that? He demanded. Victoria joined him at the window, her face paling. It's Harrison. What is he doing here? Prescott cursed under his breath. Go find out. Get rid of him. As Victoria hurried out, Jamie caught Catherine's eye. This might be their only chance. She gave an almost imperceptible nod. "You know," Jamie said loudly, drawing Prescott's attention back to him. "My father left one more thing in that safe, something you missed." "There was nothing else," Prescott snapped, but his eyes darted uncertainly toward the living room. "A key," Jamie continued, "to a safety deposit box at Cayman National Bank, where he kept the originals of everything." It was a complete fabrication, but Prescott's face showed doubt. In that moment of distraction, Catherine lunged forward, knocking a pot from the counter directly at Prescott's head. The pot missed, but it gave Jamie the second he needed. He grabbed the nearest object, a heavy cast-iron skillet, and swung it with all his strength, catching Prescott's arm. The gun clattered to the floor. Prescott roared with pain and rage. Despite his age, he was surprisingly strong. He tackled Jamie, sending them both crashing into the kitchen island. The gun skidded under the refrigerator, out of reach. Catherine scrambled for a weapon, grabbing a knife from the block on the counter. "Stop! Get off him!" Before she could intervene, Victoria returned, with Harrison behind her. But instead of the elderly butler Jamie had met, this Harrison stood tall and alert, a gun held steadily in his hand. "Federal agent," he announced calmly. "Step away from the boy, Mr. Prescott." Victoria's face contorted with fury. "You betrayed us?" "I was never with you, Ms. Whitmore," Harrison replied. "I've been undercover in the Whitmore household for 5 years, investigating your trafficking operation." Prescott froze, then slowly raised his hands. "This is a misunderstanding. The boy attacked me." "Save it," Harrison said. "We've been monitoring this property since I activated the silent alarm when Miss Sullivan removed the folder from the safe. Everything you've said has been recorded and transmitted to my team." As if on cue, the sound of multiple vehicles approaching filled the air. Within moments, armed agents in FBI jackets swarmed the cabin. Jamie sat on the cabin's dock, watching the sunset paint the lake in shades of orange and gold. The same lake where his parents had died, murdered, 11 years ago. The same water that should have claimed his life too. A gentle hand on his shoulder interrupted his thoughts. Catherine sat down beside him, offering a steaming mug of tea. "How are you holding up?" she asked softly. Jamie accepted the tea gratefully. "Processing. It's a lot to take in." The past few hours had been a blur. Prescott and Victoria had been taken away in handcuffs. FBI agents had documented everything, taken statements, secured the evidence. Harrison, whose real name was Agent Robert Kane, had explained how the FBI had been building a case against Prescott's trafficking network for years. "Your father was the first to discover what was happening," Kane had told Jamie. "He was gathering evidence to bring to us when he was killed." After his death, Alexander continued the investigation privately, but he could never find enough proof. "Until now," Jamie had said. "Until you," Kane corrected. "Your appearance forced their hand, made them desperate. Desperate people make mistakes." Now, as the lake waters rippled gently against the dock, Jamie tried to make sense of everything. "I still don't understand how I survived," he said to Catherine. "If they killed my parents here, why didn't they kill me too?" Catherine wrapped her cardigan tighter around herself against the evening chill. "Agent Kane has a theory about that. He thinks you weren't here that night." "What do you mean?" "Your father suspected something might happen. The FBI believes he might have arranged for you to be taken somewhere safe before he confronted Prescott. But whoever was supposed to protect you must have been compromised or scared off after the murders. Instead of following whatever plan Daniel had made, they left you at Pinewood." Jamie stared out at the darkening water. "So I was abandoned twice. Once by my parents, killers, and once by whoever was supposed to protect me. Or," Catherine suggested gently, "saved twice. Someone made sure you weren't here when your parents were killed. And someone chose Pinewood specifically, a place far enough away that Prescott wouldn't connect the dots, but respectable enough that you'd be safe." The thought provided little comfort. 11 years in an orphanage, believing he had been unwanted, abandoned. The weight of it all pressed down on Jamie. "What happens now?" he asked, his voice barely audible over the lapping water. "Now," said a new voice behind them, "we rebuild. They turned to find Alexander Whitmore standing on the shore, leaning heavily on a cane. His face was pale, but his eyes burned with the same intensity Jamie had first seen in his office. "Uncle Alex?" Jamie stood quickly. "You should be in the hospital." "Damn hospitals," Whitmore grumbled, making his way carefully to the dock. "I've spent enough time in sterile rooms. Needed to be here. Needed to see this through." Catherine helped him sit on one of the dock chairs. "The doctors advised against this, sir." "The doctors don't understand what's at stake," Whitmore replied. He turned to Jamie, his expression softer than Jamie had ever seen it. "I'm sorry I couldn't protect you. I'm sorry I couldn't save them." "You tried," Jamie said. "All these years you kept looking." "Not hard enough." Whitmore's voice cracked slightly. "I suspected Prescott almost immediately, but I could never prove it. And Victoria, I never wanted to believe she could be involved. She was Eliza's daughter." "People are capable of terrible things when power and money are involved," Catherine said quietly. Whitmore nodded grimly. "The evidence you found, it's everything. Financial records, transport manifests, offshore accounts. Prescott's entire operation laid bare. Daniel was always thorough." "Agent Kane said it could take down trafficking networks in 12 countries, Jamie added. "Your father's legacy," Whitmore said. "He died trying to expose this evil. Now, because of you, he'll succeed." Jamie felt a strange mix of pride and grief wash over him. Parents he couldn't remember had died, fighting for what was right. Their sacrifice would now mean something. "There's something else you should know," Whitmore continued. "With Victoria's arrest, you are now my sole heir. The Whitmore fortune, the company, everything will eventually pass to you." The weight of this statement hung in the air between them. Jamie had gone from orphan to billionaire heir in less than a week. "I don't know anything about running a company," Jamie said, overwhelmed. "I'm 17. "You'll learn." Whitmore's confidence was absolute. "You have your father's integrity and your mother's intelligence. I've seen it already. And you won't be alone. Catherine and I will help you. We'll rebuild Whitmore Enterprises together, make it what Daniel always wanted it to be. A force for good." As darkness settled over the lake, the three of them sat in companionable silence. Jamie thought about the photograph that had started everything, the key that had unlocked his past and his future. A simple family photo hidden in his mother's Bible had changed everything. "Tomorrow," Whitmore said finally, "we'll begin making arrangements. Legal matters, your education, living arrangements. But tonight, I thought you might want this." He handed Jamie a small box. Inside was a silver pocket watch, its case engraved with the Whitmore family crest. "This was Daniel's," Whitmore explained. "Given to him by our father, and to him by his father before that. It should have been yours years ago." Jamie ran his fingers over the cool metal, feeling a connection to generations of his family he'd never known existed until days ago. "Thank you." "There will be more," Whitmore promised. "Photos, keepsakes, memories, everything I've kept of theirs all these years. It's all yours now." As they made their way back to the cabin, Jamie noticed a small box on the kitchen counter that hadn't been there before. "What's that?" Catherine smiled. "Agent Kane brought it while you were at the dock. It's what was inside the stuffed bear, the one from the safety deposit box." Jamie opened the box with trembling hands. Inside was a small USB drive labeled, "For my son," and a handwritten letter. "Would you like some privacy?" Catherine asked. Jamie shook his head. "No. Stay, please." The letter was dated the day before his parents died. "My beloved son." It began in his mother's handwriting. "If you're reading this, then our worst fears have come to pass. Your father and I have discovered something terrible about the company, something people would kill to keep hidden. We've made arrangements for your safety, but we don't know if they'll be enough. Know that whatever happens, we loved you more than anything in this world. You were our miracle, our hope, our future." The letter continued, filled with the words and wishes of parents who knew they might not see their child grow up. By the time Jamie finished reading, tears streamed freely down his face. "They knew," he whispered. "They knew they might die." And they made sure you wouldn't, Whitmore said gently. That's what parents do. They protect their children, even at the cost of their own lives. Jamie wiped his eyes. What about the USB drive? Let's find out, Catherine said, retrieving a laptop from her bag. The drive contained hundreds of photos. Jamie as a baby, his parents holding him, family gatherings, holidays. A digital archive of a life Jamie couldn't remember, but that had been lovingly preserved. The final file was a video. With shaking hands, Jamie clicked play. His father's face filled the screen, younger than in the photos Jamie had seen around the Whitmore estate, but unmistakably the same man. Behind him, a woman with kind eyes and a warm smile held a baby. "Hello, son," Daniel Whitmore said. "If you're watching this, then things have gone very wrong. But your mother and I wanted to leave you something more than just evidence and legal documents. We wanted you to know us, to see us, to hear our voices." Eliza stepped forward, bouncing baby Jamie gently in her arms. "We don't know how old you'll be when you see this. Maybe still a child, maybe a grown man. But no matter how many years pass, you need to know that you were loved. Completely and absolutely." "We've discovered something terrible," Daniel continued, his expression growing serious. "People using our family's company for evil purposes. We have evidence and we're going to expose them. But it's dangerous, and we're afraid of what might happen." "We've made arrangements," Eliza added. "People we trust who will look after you if something happens to us. No matter what, you'll be safe. That's our first priority." Baby Jamie cooed and reached for the camera. Both parents smiled. "Look at him, Daniel," Eliza said softly. "He has your eyes." "And your spirit," Daniel replied. "He's going to change the world someday. I can feel it." They spoke for several more minutes, sharing stories, hopes, dreams for their son's future. As the video neared its end, Daniel looked directly into the camera, his eyes intense. "Jamie, if you're watching this because we're gone, don't let grief consume you. Don't let anger define you. We've tried to fight the darkness we've discovered, but if we've failed, that fight falls to you now. Not for vengeance, but for justice. Remember that the Whitmore name once stood for something good. Help restore that legacy." Eliza kissed baby Jamie's forehead, then looked up. "We love you, sweetheart. Forever and always." The screen went black. For a long moment, no one spoke. Jamie sat motionless, staring at the blank screen, memorizing the sound of his parents' voices, the way they looked at him, the love that radiated from every word. "They saved those children," he said finally, "the ones Prescott was trafficking. By leaving this evidence, by making sure it would eventually be found, they saved them." Whitmore nodded. "Hundreds, perhaps thousands over the years. Your parents' legacy." "And now it's my turn," Jamie said, a new resolve hardening within him, to continue what they started. The next morning, as sunlight streamed through the cabin windows, Jamie sat at his father's desk, looking through more of the photos he'd discovered. Each image was a puzzle piece, helping him construct the parents he'd never known. A knock at the door interrupted his thoughts. Catherine entered, followed by Agent Kane. "Good morning, Jamie," Kane said. "How are you holding up?" "Better," Jamie replied honestly. "Having answers helps." Kane nodded understandingly. "I have some news. We've been questioning Victoria and Prescott separately. Victoria's already trying to cut a deal, offering to testify against Prescott in exchange for leniency." "Will she get it?" Jamie asked. "Not much," Kane assured him. "The evidence against her is substantial, but her testimony will help us dismantle Prescott's entire network more quickly." Catherine set a cup of coffee on the desk. "Have they explained how Jamie survived that night?" Kane pulled out a small notebook. "Victoria claims that wasn't part of the plan. They came to confront Daniel about the evidence, things escalated, and both Daniel and Eliza ended up dead. According to Victoria, Jamie wasn't even here that night." "My parents had sent me somewhere safe," Jamie said, remembering Catherine's theory from the previous evening. "With the family housekeeper at the time," Kane confirmed. "A woman named Margaret Winters." The name meant nothing to Jamie, but Whitmore, who had entered silently during the conversation, inhaled sharply. "Maggie," he said. "She disappeared right after Daniel and Eliza died. I always assumed that Prescott had killed her too. Kane finished. He tried. She managed to escape with Jamie, but she knew they'd be looking for both of them, so she made a choice. She left Jamie at Pinewood, where he'd be safe but untraceable, then used herself as a decoy. She led Prescott's men on a chase across 3 states before disappearing completely. "She saved my life," Jamie said quietly, "by giving up her own." "Not quite," Kane smiled slightly. "We found her, Jamie. Alive. She's been living under an assumed name in Oregon for the past 11 years, working as a kindergarten teacher." Jamie's heart raced. "She's alive? Can I meet her?" "She's on her way here now," Kane confirmed. "Should arrive this afternoon. She's been afraid to come forward all these years, worried that Prescott would find her, and through her, possibly find you. All this time." Whitmore shook his head in amazement. Maggie was protecting him, even from a distance. "There's more," Kane continued. "Margaret Winters kept a journal, detailed accounts of everything she witnessed in the Whitmore household leading up to Daniel and Eliza's deaths. It corroborates everything and adds new details. Between her testimony, the evidence you found, and Victoria's confession, Prescott will never see the outside of a prison again." As Kane departed, promising to return with Margaret Winters later that day, Jamie found himself overcome with a strange sense of peace. The mystery that had defined his existence was finally unraveling. The truth, painful as it was bringing closure. "What are you thinking?" Catherine asked, noticing his expression. "About how a single photograph changed everything," Jamie replied. "If I hadn't found that picture in my mother's Bible—" "You would have found another way," Whitmore said confidently. "The truth has a way of surfacing, especially when there are people determined to uncover it." Jamie fingered the silver pocket watch his uncle had given him. "I wish I could remember them, even just one memory." "You will have something better," Catherine said gently. "You'll have their legacy, the chance to continue what they started, making the world better, fighting injustice." Whitmore placed a hand on Jamie's shoulder. "When you were born, Daniel called me from the hospital. He was transformed. He said, 'Alex, everything's different now. Everything I do, everything we build, it's all for him now.' He meant you, Jamie. The future they imagined, it's yours to create now." As the morning sun climbed higher, bathing the lake in golden light, Jamie stood on the dock once more. In his hand, he held the photograph that had started everything, his parents and himself as a baby, standing on this very spot. The past could not be changed. His parents could not be brought back. But their courage, their sacrifice, their love had survived. In him, through him, their legacy would continue. And somewhere in Oregon, a woman who had given up everything to protect a child not her own was on her way to reunite with him. Another piece of the puzzle. Another connection to the past. Another chance to understand who he was and where he came from. Jamie Reynolds, no, Jamie Whitmore, looked out across the water, feeling for the first time not like an orphan discovering his past, but like a son honoring his parents' legacy. And in that moment, he made a silent promise to the parents he had lost. Their sacrifice would not be in vain. The truth had finally come to light. Justice would be served. And the Whitmore name would stand for something good again. All because of a faded photograph and the courage to seek the truth, no matter how painful. Margaret Winters arrived at the lake house that afternoon, just as Agent Kane had promised. Jamie watched from the window as a silver sedan pulled up the gravel driveway. A woman in her 60s, with silver-streaked hair and kind eyes, stepped out, glancing nervously at the house. "Is that her?" Jamie asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Whitmore nodded, his expression a mix of emotions. "Maggie, after all these years." Jamie hesitated at the door. "What do you say to the woman who saved your life as a baby, who gave up her own life to protect yours?" The questions tumbled through his mind as he finally stepped onto the porch. Margaret saw him and froze, her hand flying to her mouth. "Jamie," she whispered. "Oh my God, you look just like him." "Like my father," Jamie said. She nodded, tears filling her eyes. Daniel's eyes, Eliza's smile. They stood awkwardly for a moment, the weight of 11 years hanging between them. Then Margaret stepped forward and tentatively opened her arms. Jamie moved into her embrace, surprised by how familiar it felt, as if some deep, pre-verbal part of him remembered her. "I've dreamed of this day," she said, her voice breaking. "But I was so afraid. Afraid they'd find you if I tried to make contact." Inside the cabin, over tea, Margaret shared her story. How she'd been the Whitmore family's housekeeper for 20 years. How she'd watched Daniel and Eliza fall in love, marry, welcome their baby son. How she'd become a second mother to Victoria after Eliza married Daniel. How she'd grown suspicious of Victoria's relationship with Lawrence Prescott. "The night before," she explained, her hands trembling slightly around her teacup, "Eliza came to me in a panic. She'd overheard Victoria and Prescott discussing plans to take care of Daniel. She asked me to take you to my sister's farm in Vermont until they could join us." "But they never made it," Jamie said quietly. Margaret shook her head, tears spilling down her weathered cheeks. "I was waiting for them. When they didn't arrive, I called the lake house. No answer. Then I saw the news the next morning. Tragic accident, prominent business couple dead." "You knew it wasn't an accident," Whitmore said. "I knew," Margaret confirmed. "And I knew they'd come for Jamie next, the rightful heir. So I ran, changed our appearances, used cash only, stayed off the grid. But they were close behind us. After 3 weeks, I realized I couldn't keep Jamie safe as long as I was with him. So you left me at Pinewood." Jamie finished. Margaret's eyes pleaded for understanding. "It was the hardest thing I've ever done. I chose it because it was 3 states away from where we'd been tracked, in a small town where no one would look. I left anonymous instructions to name you Jamie Reynolds, after my maiden name. Then I headed west, making sure I was seen, leaving a trail for them to follow away from you." Jamie reached across the table and took her hand. "You saved my life, but I abandoned you," she whispered. "Left you to grow up without family, without history." "You gave me a future," Jamie countered. "A chance to grow up at all." Agent Kane, who had been quietly taking notes, looked up. "Mrs. Winters, your testimony is going to be crucial in the case against Prescott and Victoria Whitmore. Are you prepared for that?" Margaret's face hardened with resolve. "I've been preparing for 11 years. Everything I witnessed, everything I heard, I wrote it all down, kept journals, memorized details, for this day, for justice for Daniel and Eliza." As the afternoon wore on, Jamie learned more about his parents through Margaret's stories than he had from all the photographs and videos combined. She knew their habits, their dreams, the way his father always sang off-key while making breakfast, how his mother would read physics journals aloud to baby Jamie. "She was convinced you'd be a scientist," Margaret smiled. "Said you had the most curious eyes she'd ever seen." "And Daniel was certain you'd be a writer," Whitmore added. "He used to read you poetry instead of children's books." Said there was no point in dumbing things down for a Whitmore. For the first time, Jamie's parents became real people to him, not just names or faces in photographs, but complex, loving humans who had wanted the best for their son. As evening approached, Agent Kane prepared to leave, taking Margaret with him to a safe location until the trial. Before she left, she handed Jamie a small, wrapped package. "I've carried this with me all these years," she said. "It was the only thing of yours I kept. I hoped someday I might be able to return it to you." Inside the wrapping was a small blue blanket, frayed at the edges and soft with age. "Your baby blanket," Margaret explained. "You wouldn't sleep without it. When I left you at Pinewood, I couldn't bear to leave it with you. It was too distinctive, too traceable back to the Whitmores. But I kept it safe, all this time." Jamie pressed the soft fabric to his cheek, wondering if some cellular memory might recognize the comfort it had once provided. "Thank you," he whispered. "For everything." After Margaret and Kane departed, promising to stay in close contact as the case progressed, Jamie found himself standing once more at the edge of the lake, the blanket still clutched in his hand. "What are you thinking?" Catherine asked, joining him on the shore. "About parallel lives," Jamie replied. "The life I could have had if my parents had lived. The life Margaret gave up to protect me. The life I built at Pinewood without knowing any of this. And the life ahead of you now," Catherine added gently. The next few weeks passed in a whirlwind of legal meetings, press statements, and preparations for the trials of Lawrence Prescott and Victoria Whitmore. Jamie, now officially recognized as James Daniel Whitmore, heir to the Whitmore fortune, found himself thrust into a spotlight he'd never imagined. Reporters camped outside the estate gates. Business associates called constantly, seeking reassurance about the company's future. Lawyers worked around the clock to untangle the legal complexities of Jamie's reappearance and inheritance. Through it all, Alexander Whitmore remained a steady presence, guiding Jamie through the complexities of his new reality. His health improved gradually, though doctors warned the poison had taken a toll on his heart. "We should discuss your education," Whitmore said one evening as they reviewed documents in his study. "You've missed years of proper schooling at that orphanage." Jamie bristled slightly. Pinewood did its best. The teachers cared, even with limited resources. Whitmore nodded, acknowledging the correction. "Nevertheless, to take your rightful place in the company, you'll need specific knowledge. Business, economics, finance. What if that's not what I want?" Jamie interrupted, surprising himself with the question. Whitmore looked up sharply. "What do you mean?" Jamie struggled to articulate feelings he was only beginning to understand himself. The Whitmore legacy. It's about more than just making money, isn't it? My father discovered something wrong and tried to fix it, even at the cost of his life. "Your point?" Whitmore asked, though his tone suggested he already understood. "I want to make sure the company never enables that kind of evil again," Jamie said. "I want to use the Whitmore resources to fight trafficking, to help victims, to create something good from all this tragedy." To Jamie's surprise, Whitmore smiled, a genuine smile that transformed his usually stern face. "You truly are Daniel's son. He would be proud of you, Jamie." The next morning, Catherine found Jamie in the estate's library, surrounded by books on corporate social responsibility, ethical business practices, and human trafficking prevention. "Research?" she asked, setting down a cup of coffee beside him. Jamie nodded. "I've been thinking about what my father would have wanted for the company. For me. And? I want to establish a foundation," Jamie said, the idea crystallizing as he spoke. "The Daniel and Eliza Whitmore Foundation. Dedicated to combating human trafficking and supporting survivors. Funded by the company profits. A way to honor their sacrifice." Catherine sat beside him, her expression thoughtful. "It's a wonderful idea. But running a foundation is complex work. It requires expertise, connections, strategic thinking." "I know I have a lot to learn," Jamie acknowledged. "But I have time, and resources, and people who can help me." He looked at Catherine meaningfully. "People who knew my parents and understand what they stood for." Before Catherine could respond, Harrison, the real Harrison, not Agent Kane, appeared in the doorway. "Excuse me, Mr. Whitmore, but there's someone here to see Mr. Jamie. A young man from Pinewood Orphanage. He says his name is Eli." Jamie's face lit up. "Eli's here? My roommate from Pinewood?" Harrison nodded. "He appears quite determined to see you." Jamie found Eli pacing nervously in the foyer, looking wildly out of place in his worn jeans and faded t-shirt amid the mansion's opulence. "Eli," Jamie called, rushing forward to embrace his friend. "How did you get here?" "3 buses and a lot of walking." Eli grinned, returning the hug before stepping back to take in Jamie's transformed appearance. "Look at you, man. All fancy and designer clothes. You really are a Whitmore now, huh?" There was an undercurrent of something, hurt, perhaps, or betrayal, in Eli's voice that made Jamie wince. "I'm still me, Eli. Come on, let's go somewhere we can talk." Jamie led Eli to the estate's gardens, to a secluded bench beneath an ancient oak tree. It was as far from Pinewood's institutional setting as possible, yet somehow felt right for this conversation. "So," Eli said, looking around at the manicured grounds, "I guess the rumors are true. You really are some long-lost billionaire heir." "It's complicated," Jamie replied. "But yes, apparently I am." "And you just forgot about all of us back at Pinewood." The hurt in Eli's voice was unmistakable now. 3 weeks, Jamie. No calls, no messages. Miss Harper wouldn't tell us anything. Just that you'd been adopted. I thought we were family. Shame washed over Jamie. In the whirlwind of discoveries and dangers, he'd neglected the people who had been his real family for 11 years. I'm sorry, Eli. You're right. I should have called. It's just been… Yeah, I know. Eli cut him off. Life-changing stuff. I get it. I saw the news. Trafficking ring, murder, corporate conspiracy. Pretty wild for a kid from Pinewood. It's been overwhelming, Jamie admitted. But that's no excuse. You are my family, Eli. You and the others at Pinewood. That hasn't changed. Eli studied him, searching for sincerity. So what happens now? You just move on to your mansion and yachts and private jets, and forget your old life? Jamie shook his head firmly. Never. In fact, I've been thinking about ways to use all this, he gestured at the estate around them, to help places like Pinewood, to make a difference for kids like us. Like us? Eli raised an eyebrow. You're not one of us anymore, Jamie. You're a Whitmore. The words stung, but Jamie recognized the fear behind them. The fear of being left behind, forgotten. It was a fear every orphan at Pinewood shared. Being a Whitmore doesn't erase who I was, who I am, Jamie said quietly. It just gives me the resources to do something about it, to help. For the next hour, Jamie shared his idea for the foundation with Eli, explaining how he wanted to not only fight trafficking, but also support organizations that helped vulnerable children. Places like Pinewood, but with better resources, better opportunities. I want to create scholarships, Jamie explained, warming to his vision. College funds for every kid at Pinewood. Vocational training for those who don't want college. Support services for aging out. The things we always talked about, Eli. The things we wished existed. Gradually, Eli's skepticism gave way to cautious interest. You're serious about this? Completely, Jamie confirmed. And I want your help. You understand the needs better than anyone. You could be part of building this, making it real. By the time Eli left that evening, with promises to return and a personal cell phone Jamie insisted on giving him, Jamie felt a sense of purpose crystallizing within him. The foundation wouldn't just honor his parents. It would bridge his two worlds, connecting the privilege he'd inherited with the needs he'd experienced firsthand. Your friend seemed impressed with the estate, Whitmore observed over dinner that night. Overwhelmed is more like it, Jamie replied. It's a lot to take in when you've spent your life in an institution. Whitmore considered this. You've been thinking about the foundation idea? Yes, and I think I know where to start, Jamie said. Pinewood Orphanage needs a complete renovation. New facilities, updated technology, better educational resources. It would be the perfect first project. And a meaningful one for you personally, Catherine added. The first of many. Jamie nodded. But I need to learn more. About business. About philanthropy. About how to make real, lasting change. You will, Whitmore assured him. And I'll be right beside you. We both will. He glanced at Catherine, who nodded in agreement. The next morning, a package arrived for Jamie. A thick manila envelope with no return address. Inside was a worn leather journal and a handwritten note from Margaret Winters. I kept this all these years, the note read. It's Eliza's journal from the months before she died. I took it from the lake house that night, afraid it might contain information Prescott was looking for. I think it's time you had it. It might help you understand her better. With trembling hands, Jamie opened the journal. His mother's handwriting filled the pages. Elegant yet practical. Just like the woman he was coming to know through others' memories. The entries began with mundane details about her work, her pregnancy, her hopes for her child. But as Jamie read on, the tone changed. Eliza had begun to suspect something was wrong at Whitmore Enterprises. strange shipping manifests, discrepancies in financial reports, meetings Daniel wasn't invited to. Then came the entry that made Jamie's blood run cold. Victoria came to the house today, upset about something. When she thought I wasn't listening, I overheard her on the phone with Lawrence. Once Daniel is out of the way, we can move forward. Something is very wrong. I fear for my husband. For my baby. Daniel says I'm being paranoid. But I've never seen Victoria look at Jamie with anything but resentment. What if they're planning something? What if they know Daniel is gathering evidence? Jamie read late into the night, absorbing his mother's growing fear, her desperate plans to protect her family, her determination to expose the truth. The final entry was dated the day before she died. We're leaving tomorrow. Margaret will take Jamie to Vermont tonight. Daniel and I will meet them there after he confronts Lawrence with the evidence. He refuses to run without trying to stop this evil one last time. I'm terrified, but I understand. The Whitmore name should stand for something good. If we run without trying to stop this, what example does that set for our son? Sometimes doing the right thing means risking everything. I pray Jamie will understand this someday. I pray he'll know how much we love him. Enough to risk our lives to make the world better for him. For all children. Jamie closed the journal, tears streaming down his face. His mother's words, her final thoughts, had traveled across 11 years to reach him. And in them, he found not just grief, but purpose. A legacy, too. Our mission is twofold: to combat human trafficking worldwide and to support vulnerable children, particularly those without families. Cameras flashed as Jamie continued, explaining the Foundation's initial projects, including the complete renovation of Pinewood Orphanage, the establishment of a scholarship fund for orphaned children, and a partnership with international law enforcement to identify and dismantle trafficking networks. The Whitmore name was nearly destroyed by greed and corruption. Jamie acknowledged, his gaze sweeping across the assembled crowd. But before that, it stood for innovation, integrity, and service. Today, we begin the work of reclaiming that legacy. In the front row sat Eli, now the Foundation's first official employee, along with several other teenagers from Pinewood. Margaret Winters was there too, finally free to live openly now that Prescott and Victoria had been convicted. And Agent Kane, whose persistent investigation had helped bring the truth to light. My parents gave their lives trying to expose evil and protect the innocent. Jamie continued, emotion thickening his voice. I never knew them. I grew up believing I had been abandoned, unwanted, but through a series of remarkable events, I discovered not only my true identity but my purpose. He held up the faded photograph that had started everything, his parents and himself as a baby, standing at the lake house. This photograph changed my life. It led me home. It revealed truth. It connected me to a legacy I never knew was mine. After the press conference, as the crowd dispersed and staff began clearing away chairs, Jamie found himself alone at the edge of the estate's gardens, looking out over the rolling hills beyond. The weight of responsibility was enormous. A multinational corporation, a newborn foundation, a family legacy to restore. Penny, for your thoughts? Catherine approached, offering a cup of coffee. Jamie accepted it gratefully. Just thinking about how much has changed in 4 months. From orphan to heir. From no family to all this. Overwhelming? Terrifying, Jamie admitted. What if I fail? What if I can't live up to their legacy? You won't be alone, Catherine reminded him. Your uncle, me, your friends from Pinewood, Margaret, we're all here to help. I know, Jamie said, and I'm grateful. But ultimately, it's my responsibility now. My name. My legacy. One day at a time, Catherine advised. That's how all great things are built. As sunset painted the sky in shades of gold and crimson, Alexander Whitmore joined them, leaning heavily on his cane. His health had stabilized but never fully recovered from Prescott's poison. The press coverage is excellent, he reported. Stock prices are already rising on the announcement. The board is cautiously optimistic about our new direction. "And the foundation?" Jamie asked. "Donations are pouring in," Whitmore confirmed. "Your story has touched people, Jamie. The orphan who discovered his true identity and dedicated his inheritance to helping others. It resonates." Jamie nodded, grateful but uncomfortable with being the face of the narrative. "It's not about me. It's about them." He touched the silver pocket watch he now carried everywhere, his father's watch. "About honoring their sacrifice. And about creating your own legacy," Whitmore added. "Daniel and Eliza gave you life twice. Once when you were born, and once when they sent you away to protect you. What you do with that life is up to you." As darkness fell and lights began to twinkle on across the estate grounds, Jamie made a silent promise to the parents he'd never known. Their courage would not be forgotten. Their sacrifice would not be in vain. The Whitmore name would stand for something good again. And somewhere, in that space between memory and hope, between loss and purpose, Jamie felt something he'd searched for his entire life. Belonging. Not just to a name or a fortune, but to a legacy of courage, integrity, and love. The photograph that had started everything now sat framed on his desk, a constant reminder not just of what he'd lost, but of what he'd found. A reminder that sometimes, the greatest journeys begin with the smallest discoveries, and that even the most painful truths can lead to healing, to purpose, to home. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.